You've probably had this happen. You ask AI to explain something, and the answer is either way too simple and patronizing, or it's drowning you in jargon you don't understand. It's frustrating because you know AI is capable of giving you what you need, but somehow it keeps missing the mark. Today we're fixing that. You're going to learn how to get AI to explain things at exactly the level you need, whether you're a complete beginner or a deep expert. This is one of the most practical customization skills you can develop, and it works by leveraging something we've talked about in the very first video of this series, pattern completion. Let's dive in. Here's the problem. When you ask AI to explain something without giving it context about who you are, one of three things usually happens. You might say, explain it like I'm 5, which sounds like it would work, right? Except you're not actually 5 years old. You end up with an explanation so oversimplified it's useless for making real decisions. It's patronizing and it doesn't give you the depth you actually need. Or you give it no specification at all, and AI defaults to some fictional, average educated adult that doesn't actually exist. You get drowned in jargon with assumptions about knowledge you don't have. Terms get thrown around like you already know what they mean, and you're left more confused than when you started. Or maybe you try, give me the basics, thinking that'll split the difference. But here's the thing. What AI considers basic and what you consider basic might be completely different. It's still guessing, and that guess often misses. The common thread here, AI doesn't know where you're starting from. And if it doesn't know where you are, it can't meet you there. Think about it from AI's perspective for a second. It can't see your resume. It doesn't know if you're a software engineer, a high school teacher, a small business owner, or someone who's never touched technology beyond using a smartphone. It has zero context about your background. So what does it do? It defaults to the middle of the road explanation aimed at a completely fictional baseline that fits nobody in particular. And unlike a human teacher or tutor, AI can't gauge your understanding in real time. There's no facial expression telling it you're lost. There's no opportunity for you to interrupt and say, wait, what does that term mean? It gives you one response based on the words you used, and that's it. The only information AI has to work with is what you explicitly tell it. If you don't set the level, it's reading between the lines and often getting it wrong. So let me show you what this looks like in practice. Say you ask, how does encryption work? Pretty straightforward question, right? Without any context, you might get something like, encryption uses mathematical algorithms to transform plain text into ciphertext using keys. Okay, but what if you don't know about algorithms, plain text, or ciphertext? That explanation just created more questions than it answered. Or maybe AI thinks you need something simpler and gives you, it scrambles your data so bad guys can't read it. That's technically true, but it's patronizing and doesn't help you make informed decisions about which encryption method to use or why it matters. On the flip side, you might get asymmetric cryptographic protocols utilize public key infrastructure with RSA or elliptic curve implementations. And you've lost most people at asymmetric. Same question, wildly different answers depending on what level AI guesses you're at. None of these might be what you actually need, and that's the problem we're solving. The fix is simple. Tell AI exactly who you're talking to. Explain like I'm a new tech sets a clear starting point. AI knows to avoid assumptions and build from the ground up. I'm a developer, skip the basics. Saves you time by jumping straight to what you don't already know. Assume high school physics knowledge establishes a specific baseline for technical depth, which is perfect if you're explaining something that builds on that foundation. I'm teaching this to 8th graders frames the entire explanation around your actual audience, not some abstract concept of simplicity. These specifications work because they give AI the context it needs to activate the right patterns, which brings us how this actually works under the hood. Remember from video 1, AI doesn't think or reason. It completes patterns based on what it learned from millions of examples during training. When you specify beginner, you're not just asking AI to use simpler words, you're directing it to pull from patterns it learned from introductory content. Textbooks, getting started guides, explainer articles designed for people new to a topic. When you say expert, you're pointing it toward technical documentation patterns, white papers, API docs, implementation guides written for people who already know the fundamentals. And when you specify 8th grader, you're activating educational material patterns, lessons plans, age appropriate explanations, examples that connect to what middle schoolers already understand. It's the same question, but you're tapping into completely different pattern libraries based on how you frame it. And that's why specification works so powerfully. You're not changing AI's capability, you're directing which patterns it applies. So, how do you actually specify level in practice? There are four main approaches, and you can mix and match them depending on what makes sense. First, specify by experience. I'm new to data analysis, or I'm experienced with SQL databases. This tells AI exactly where you're starting from in terms of familiarity with the topic. Second, specify by role. I'm a marketing manager, or I'm a data scientist. Roles come with implied knowledge. A data scientist probably knows statistics, a marketing manager might not. This helps AI calibrate without you needing to list everything you know and don't know. Third, specify the audience. Explain for sixth graders or for my board meeting. This is especially useful if you're not the end consumer of the explanation. You need it pitched at their level, not yours. Fourth, specify by comparison, like Spotify, but for podcasts. Or, unlike MySQL, this works by comparisons anchor the explanation to something familiar, which makes new concepts much easier to grasp. Let's look at concrete examples of each of these in action. Here's what beginner level specifications look like. Say you prompt, explain machine learning to someone who's never coded before. Use everyday analogies. What you get is zero jargon. Everything's in plain English with no technical terms assumed. You get concrete comparisons. Instead of talking about training neural networks, AI might say something like, it's teaching a dog tricks through repetition and rewards. The logic is built step by step, sequentially from first principle. No shortcuts, no assumptions that you've seen this concept before. And the examples are things you already know. Netflix recommendations, not regression algorithms. Spotify playlists, not machine learning models. Familiar ground makes unfamiliar concepts accessible. This level works when you're entering entirely new territory and need the foundation built carefully. Intermediate specification looks different. Your prompt might be, I understand APIs and REST principles. Explain GraphQL's advantages for someone at my level. Now, AI assumes foundational knowledge. It's not going to waste your time defining HTTP or explaining what an endpoint is. You already know that. Instead, it focuses on differences and makes direct comparisons. Unlike REST, where you'd need multiple endpoints to fetch related data, GraphQL lets you request exactly what you need in a single query. It's technical but accessible. Proper terminology gets used without drowning you in theory or edge cases you don't need yet. And it provides practical context. When to use GraphQL, what problem it solves, what trade offs you're making. This is about application, not just explanation. This level works when you have working knowledge of adjacent concepts and need to understand how something new fits into what you already know. Expert level specification goes even further. Imagine prompting, I'm a senior backend engineer. Explain Kubernetes pod networking architecture with technical accuracy. What you get is a dense technical detail, CNI plugins, overlay networks, service meshes, all covered in depth because AI knows you can handle it. You get industry terminology with no hedging, no basically or in simple terms, just the precise technical language used in production environments. You get implementation specifics, configuration examples, not just conceptual overviews. How to actually set this up, what goes wrong, what the trade offs are. And you get edge cases and failure modes, when things break, and why certain architectural choices matter in practice. This level works when you need the full technical picture without simplification, because you're making real implementation decisions that require that depth. Here's something important to understand. There's no objectively correct level for any explanation. There's only the level that matches where you actually are. You might be a complete beginner on something you've never touched. You might have some exposure where you've heard some terms but don't really understand them yet. You might have working knowledge from using something occasionally. Maybe you use it daily and want advanced insights. Or you might have deep expertise and you're looking for optimization strategies and edge cases. The key is being honest about where you actually are on that spectrum. AI can meet you there, but only if you tell it where there is. Don't inflate your knowledge level because you think you should know more. And don't undersell yourself either. Just be accurate. That's what gets you the explanation that's actually useful. So when should you use this technique? Level specification matters most when you're learning new concepts and entering unfamiliar territory. That's when the baseline really makes a difference between understanding and confusion. It matters when you're teaching or explaining to others. You need the explanation pitched at their level, not yours, so you can pass that information along effectively. It matters for technical documentation where audience expertise demands both depth and detail. A user manual needs different treatment than an API reference guide. And it matters when you're bridging knowledge gaps, moving from what you know to what you need to know next. Where it doesn't matter, simple factual questions like what time does the store close? Creative writing tasks where technical calibration is irrelevant, or straightforward requests like list 5 pizza toppings that have no knowledge requirement at all. Use level specifications strategically where it actually helps. Don't throw it at everything. Let's talk about what doesn't work because I see these mistakes constantly. Make it simple is too vague. Simple for a PhD is radically different than simple for a high school student. AI has no idea where to land. Dumb it down gives no target level. You're asking AI to guess, just with slightly different phrasing. Not too technical doesn't establish a baseline. What's too technical to you might be perfectly fine for someone else, and vice versa. What does work? Something like explain for someone who knows Excel but not Python. That's specific. It establishes a clear starting point. AI knows exactly where you are. Comfortable with spreadsheets and formulas? Not familiar with programming. Now that's actionable context. The best specifications combine multiple elements: your role, your domain knowledge, and what you already understand. Watch how these examples layer context. I'm a real estate agent learning about CRMs. I'm comfortable with basic spreadsheets, but haven't used specialized software before. That tells AI your role, what you know, and where your gaps are. I teach high school biology and need to explain CRISPR to my students. They understand DNA basics, but nothing about gene editing. You're setting level for someone else, which is perfectly valid. I'm presenting to non technical executives. They care about business impact, not implementation details. This clarifies both audience and what matters to them. I have Python experience, but I'm new to async programming. Don't explain what functions are, but do explain event loops. This draws a clear line here. Here's what I know, here's what I don't. The more specific you are about context, the better AI can calibrate. Here's where it gets really powerful. Level specification works even better when you combine it with other techniques we covered in this series. From video 19, you learned about using examples in your prompt. You can combine that. I'm new to coding. Explain loops with examples like this, and put your example. From video 20, you learned about breaking down complex tasks. Stack it. I'm intermediate. Break this into steps appropriate for my level. From video 21, you learned about using constraints. Combine them. Expert level explanation in under 100 words. From video 12, you learned about chain of thought reasoning. Layer it. Beginner here, walk me through your reasoning step by step. Each technique reinforces the others. They're not competing approaches, they're complementary tools you can stack for maximum clarity. That's how you get really precise, really useful responses. Let me give you a quick framework for deciding when and how to specify level. Ask yourself, is there a knowledge gap? If you're learning something unfamiliar, specify your starting level. Do you know your audience? If you're explaining to others, specify their role and background, not yours. Are you teaching or learning? State your purpose and what knowledge you're building from. Do you need specific depth? Explicitly state what you already know versus what you need explained. Run through those 4 questions and you'll know exactly how to frame your prompt. It becomes automatic pretty quickly. Let me show you this in action with real comparison. Without level specification, explain blockchain. What do you get? A generic explanation that assumes some technical knowledge. It probably hits the wrong level. Either it's too simple or too complex. And it's not actually useful for making real decisions. You're left confused or underwhelmed. Time wasted. With level specifications, I run a small business and keep hearing about blockchain. Explain what it actually does and whether I should care, assuming I'm not technical. Now you get a relevant explanation focused on business value, not cryptography. You get appropriate depth for decision making, not theory you don't need. And it's actually useful. You walk away with clarity and actionable understanding. Same topic, wildly different outcomes. That's the power of specification. Now let's be honest about limitations because level specification is powerful, but it's not magic. It doesn't prevent hallucinations. AI can still make things up regardless of how you set the level. If you want to know more about handling that, go back and watch video 3. It doesn't add knowledge AI doesn't have. If the model wasn't trained on something, specifying level won't create that knowledge out of thin air. It won't perfectly match human tutoring. A human teacher adapts in real time based on your facial expressions and questions. AI gives you one calibrated response and can't adjust mid conversation unless you prompt it again. And it still requires your judgment on accuracy. Level specification helps with clarity, not correctness. You need to verify the explanation makes sense and isn't confidently wrong about the facts. Be realistic about what this technique can and can't do. It's incredibly useful, but it's not a substitute for critical thinking. So here's the bottom line: AI can't read your mind. It doesn't know who you are, what you know, or what level you need. But you can set the stage. Specify your experience level. I'm new to this, or I use this daily. Name your role or audience as a teacher or for my executives. State what you know versus don't know. I understand X, but not Y. Be explicit about depth needed, high level overview, or implementation details. Do those 4 things, and you get explanations that actually make sense for your situation. Not too simple, not over your head, just right. That's what specification gives you. If this video helped you understand how to get better, more useful responses from AI, please subscribe. We're building real understanding of how AI works, one practical technique at a time. And if you're a business owner or team leader trying to figure out how AI might fit into your operations, let's talk. We help businesses cut through hype and identify actual practical applications that make sense for them. Visit eauclairai.com to learn more. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.